welcome to another episode on the GumChu channel. Today we are going to be doing a little bit of a twist of things you might be expecting to see or hear from the content. You see, I refrained from doing any gum chewing today, solely because I figured Halloween was more so about trick-or-treating, and what do you get when you go trick-or-treating? Either jump scares or a bunch of candy, which we have here today. Halloween-themed candy. So, on top of that, for tonight's episode, we're going to be reading a book, The Ghost Stories of Haunted Ontario Lakes. Now, the Haunted series have several books which kind of give first-person stories, or also stories of, I guess, things that people have told us tales for years on end. But we're going to go ahead and read through a few of these stories ourselves and try to get into the Halloween spirit. I know I've promised numerous videos based on Halloween-themed subjects, but I gotta be honest with you, it's been really hard to get out there. Either it's been very rainy, as typical autumn likes to show up with in style, with a bunch of rain and cloud coverage, or it's been very cold. So, regardless of the situation, neither were an advantageous point for having microphones and cameras set up with lighting. So, I got some tea here. It's pomegranate flavored tea. And I got some candies here. Let's start with the Whoppers. So, I'm not really sure what to anticipate from the book. I'm really excited to start it, though. I haven't read them in quite a while. Okay. We're going to read the back here. It is strange that such haunting tales and eerie ghost stories come from the beautiful cottage country of Ontario's Lakeland, but researcher, authors De Silva and Hind, have uncovered a trove of well-documented revelations about the shadowy side of our local history that can be seen and felt even in the present day. The doomed ship Atlantic, aka the Manitoulin, burned not once but twice, and the ghosts of her drowned crew can still be seen struggling through the water to reach the safety of shore at the south end of Georgian Bay. The curator of the West Parry Sound District Museum got nighttime visits from the museum's resident ghost children. They were frightened by mannequins in an exhibit of military memorabilia. Boaters and fishermen on the Lake Temiskaming tell tales of a massive snake-like creature known locally as Old Tess swimming through the lake's dark waters. Lights turn on and off and footsteps echo in empty hallways as Harry Corbet, former caretaker of the Pine Grove Inn, continues to make his rounds long after his death. The tragic deaths of a First Nations maiden and her lover have forever marked the area near Collingwood Caves. Their entwined souls still haunt this popular tourist destination. Visitors to the Griffin Pub in Bracebridge are often greeted by a beautiful woman in a red dress. Who she was in a life remains a mystery, but she is a regular at the establishment even in death. Here we have the well-illustrated cover of the Haunted Ontario Lake stories. And let's go ahead and start reading this. It's close to midnight. The moon rides high in the sky, casting a menacing light upon the scene. Somewhere off in the distance, an owl hoots hauntingly. It cries, the only sound to break the unnatural stillness of the night. You shiver almost uncontrollably, both from the chill and from the terror seizing control of your mind, as a misty form emerges from the darkness. Excuse me. It stretches an ethereal arm toward you. Welcome to any one of countless chilling experiences from the numerous spooky tales across cottage country. Just as cottagers are reluctant to pack up and return home after a blissful weekend, so too, it seems, several spirits are hesitant to leave this region of carefree leisure amid the ruggedly beautiful wilderness. Countless ghost stories haunt the region's dense forests, deep lakes, and quaint communities, which many found their way into cottage country ghosts. In that book, readers delve into 18 chilling tales, principally from across Muskoka and Parry Sound District. Sometimes the chills were upon us. Once, while speaking in an audience about the spirits inhabiting the historic inn at the Falls of Bracebridge, just as Maria mentioned an unsavory aspect of a former owner, the chandelier above her head began to rattle violently. This was no showmanship in our part, nor was there any logical explanation. Trust us, we tried to find one. Were people upstairs responsible? No. None of our rooms above were occupied. Had a train rattled along the tracks in the distance? No one had heard anything. There was nothing that hinted at an earthly cause. We and the dozen or so startled guests gathered around us came to the conclusion that the spirit of the one-timer owner was showing his displeasure at the turn the conversation had taken. That the guests were thrilled by such demonstrations of paranormal activity should come as no surprise. Just look at the number of ghost tours that have risen up like the apparitions from mist-shrouded headstones. Participants anticipate encountering something supernatural for the excitement of spine-chilling moment of horror out of a genuine scientific interest or to have deep-seated questions about life and death answered. Cottage country is not immune to this trend, from Halliburton to North Bay to Parry Sound. I'm so sorry. I'm okay. I'm so sorry. Being Halloween season, you tend to get sick. You tend to throw a sneeze. You tend to cough. You tend to feel weak. That's why we have things like tea and chocolates to make you feel better. I'm so sorry if I just ruined what was seemingly like a mood. Didn't want to ruin the jump scare. I think that was kind of a jump scare for the video. Anyways. Cottage country is not immune to this trend. From Halliburton to North Bay to Parry Sound, there are ghost tours aplenty. After the success of Cottage Country Ghosts, we decided to embark on a new adventure of leading guided ghost tours and hosting haunted weekends events. Our late autumn Spirits Come Alive weekend at the Falls. Branched out to a similar event at the Ballou Bay Inn, lantern-lit tours of the recreated Pioneer Village at Muskoka Heritage Place, and downtown ghost tours at Bracebridge. All the while, though, something gnawed at us. After the manuscript of Cottage Country Ghosts had gone off to the publisher, we found ourselves with a file bursting with material that hadn't made it into the book. Some of it was partially completed research, and there were a number of leads not yet pursued. In total, there were dozens of haunted locales from the Kawarthas to the eastern Georgian Bay in the west, from Lake Simcoe, and the south of Lake Temiskaming in the north. What were we going to do with this trove of ghoulish treasure? Why, write a sequel, of course. Or at least, that was our hope for that to happen. The original Cottage Country Ghosts would have to be a success. To our pleasure, the response was very good. People seemed to love the idea that there might be wraiths lurking beneath their cottages and restless spirits roaming among the trees of the seemingly endless forests. The sequel we had hoped for became a reality and is now in your hands. At the Griffith Pub in Bracebridge, a mysterious woman in red peeks from the windows and sweeps past patrons. The West Parry Sound District Museum is host to a paranormal activity linked to its many priceless historical treasures. In Cobalt, a haunted mine might just be inhabited by the vengeful spirits of miners who perished in the Stygian darkness where they worked. These are just some of the stories we explore in this chilling journey through Ontario's near north. Most people go to cottage country to unwind and relax, and yet whispered stories tell of countless restless souls who can find no peace. Horror aside, ghost stories are an important part of Regent's character. They reveal a great deal about the history of a place and its people. They should not be locked up in the dark secret, but rather shared. So even if you're a skeptic, get into the spirit and indulge in a good ghost story from time to time. Okay, let's get a little bit of a treat going, and then we're going to get into the chapter of Parry Sound Museum Ghosts. How does that sound? Good. Got a O. Henry bar here. These are like 2-bite brownies. This is really good tea. I'll have another bite before we read again. Got these Hershey fangs. Look how cool these are. While you are kicking back and relaxing, I'd love to know what you are dressing up as Halloween this year. Let me know in the comment section down below. And I notice a lot of my viewers are not subscribed, so I highly encourage you to click on that subscribe button down below. And if you're wondering about my absence, it's only been several days, but I had a week off to kind of catch up on some house chores and getting some motorcycles ready for winterization. And so I went ahead and did that. And that's kind of why I was kind of like away from making any videos, because I tend to have these weeks where I just kind of step away from work, but also step into another realm of work, aka housework and stuff like that. So yeah, okay, so let's get right into it. We're going to read the next chapter here. Parry Sound Museum Ghosts. A spark of fear had surfaced in Jamie M's sleeping gazed brown eyes, and an icy shiver ran through his body. The manager of the West Parry Sound District Museum lay in his bed, the chilled, invisible fingers of an unseen child gripping his arm. A small voice came from the darkness of his bedroom. "Please, get them out of here. We don't want them here. Please get them out." Jamie steadied his shaking nerves. Never before had the ghostly children inhabiting the museum followed him home. He tried to push down a rising tide of fear. Something had terribly gone wrong. James isn't alone in believing that spirits inhabit the museum atop Tower Hill overlooking Parry Sound. Over the years of a number of people who have been left with this astonishing certainty after spending some time in the building. The West Parry Sound District Museum was incorporated in November of 1982 to collect, conserve, research, house, exhibit, and interpret the long and rich history of the district. The major initiative of the board of directors at that time was to build a modern museum, which would take a full decade to realize. But collecting artifacts reflecting the district's rich history began immediately, and soon dozens of items were being donated by excited citizens eager to play a part in preserving their heritage. The first curator, Peter McVeigh, was hired in 1985, and in 1986, the museum opened in a temporary facility at the former Parry Sound Fire Hall. A new permanent home was needed, and a site atop Tower Hill, so named for the forest fire tower that had overlooked Parry Sound for as long as anyone could remember, was selected for its location. In the summer of 1991, with finances secured through federal and provincial government commitments and local fundraising, construction of the new museum of Tower Hill began. A year later, construction was completed and artifacts were placed within informative exhibits, a process that took another year. On July 3rd of 1993, the doors to this modern facility were officially opened for the first time. Today, the West Parry Sound District Museum is a popular attraction filled with archival items such as mining and logging equipment, homesteaders' personal belongings, Ojibwa relics, military paraphernalia, sorry, I can't say that word, from both world wars, and a mind-boggling array of other items. It's also filled with spirits of the past. Most notably, a pair of mischievous and cheerful children who race up and down the halls under cover of darkness and play youthful games among the exhibits. They are lost souls who would undoubtedly prefer to be reunited with their families on the other side, but something keeps them anchored to the mortal plane. James M. was a longtime curator of the museum. Although he had since moved on, the memory of his many spiritual... I hope I'm not getting sick. I apologize. Excuse me. Although he has since moved on, the memory of his many supernatural experiences within the building remain vivid to this day. Quote, "I first became aware of the spirits in West Parry Sound District Museum when I spoke to Terry Boyle, author of Haunted Ontario and former host television's Creepy Canada, who had collected ghost stories about the museum over the years," end quote, explains Monastrisky. "I told him about some of the odd little things that I came across while working there every day for the first few months. He told me there were several specific ghosts that roamed that museum. These ghosts, he was told, were two youthful spirits that came to the museum with the bell of the Parry Sound Central School. The school, which was built in 1884, when Parry Sound was still a frontier town, and demolished just over 80 years later in 1966. Spirits often attach themselves to personal items such as clothing, wedding gowns, family Bibles, and books and jewelry items that just have some kind of importance to their owners when they were alive. For some weird reason, these two children found themselves attached to the school bell for all eternity. Most kids consider going to school a sentence that must be endured and anxiously wait the time when the doors swing open and they are granted their freedom. For the spirits of the museum, their sentence is permanent. Why? There had been some deep emotional connection between them and their school for them to be bound to the bell after death. Perhaps they loved the schoolhouse they attended, or maybe some tragedy befell them there. We'll likely never know the exact reason or even the children's identities. All we know is that the bell was donated to the museum. These two youthful spirits came with it. They are playful, rambunctious, curious, and mischievous, typical children, of other words. Quote, my daughter was 6 years old at the time, and she did come to the museum with me on Sundays. I did paperwork, and she had the run of the place, whipping about for hours at a time, playing hide and seek with herself, and at other times with friends she would bring by. Terry said the young spirits more than enjoyed it when she came by, but reminded me that the spirits were children and needed parental direction, even discipline at times, end quote. Monastrisky remembers. That's Jamie M., for those who are wondering who this person is. Drawers and cupboard doors would routinely open on their own overnight, which the somewhat skeptical Monastrisky initially tried to explain away by the fact that the museum is built on a hill. The rattling of trains passing by, combined with the effects of gravity, provided a possible explanation. It was thin, Jamie admitted to himself, but he wasn't yet ready to believe in the existence of ghosts. Then an event happened that was not so easily dismissed. Quote, I had meticulously hung some art for an upcoming show. The next morning, the majority of them were turned on the side or laying on the floor. They shouldn't have fallen. They were hung securely. I rehung them, but when I returned the next day, I found them again, askewed. After several frustrating days of this, I finally spoke sternly, like I would with my daughter, while I rehung the art. I asked that the spirits do not touch the art because we had an important opening in a couple of days, Jamie explained. The next morning, the curator was pleased to find the artwork still hanging neatly on the walls, realizing that scolding the ghost children had actually worked. Monastrisky decided to ask that they did not play around in the back room with the drawers and cupboards. After the stern talking to, the drawers remained closed and the art hung beautifully. It was just as Terry Boyle said. Like any child, the young spirits needed some discipline. Months went by and Monastrisky got into the habit of talking to the spirits aloud each morning and evening, saying good morning when he opened the museum and wishing them a good night when they closed for the day. Jamie believed that the ghost children knew he was in charge and that he was looking after their museum playground. His daughter came by more often, and the flow of people visiting the museum increased. Everything was humming along nicely. Things grew suddenly intense, however, as Remembrance Day approached. Jamie had decided upon an exhibit featuring war memorabilia, momentous helmets, medals, and uniforms, and began feverishly setting it up. The museum secured 3 mannequins dressed in World War I and World War II infantry uniforms from another museum. These mannequins arrived on a Friday evening and were placed in the back room until they could be displayed in the exhibit hall. The lights were shut off at night, the doors were closed and locked, and a tired Monastrisky headed home after a hectic week. He still remembers the chilling events that followed like it was yesterday. Quote, that night as I lay sleeping, I was startled awake in the middle of the night by the kids screaming in my dream. They sounded terrified and frightened me because it felt so real. I dozed off again, and then a while later I felt the child's hand gripping my arm, shaking it, and in a whisper I heard, please get them out of here. We don't want them here. I groggily turned on the side and told my little girl to go back to bed and that it was only a bad dream. The voice came back again, crying, please get them out. I turned, opened my eyes, and found no one there, end quote. Jamie's heart was pounding in his chest. He rolled out of bed to check on his daughter, and he was relieved to find her sound asleep in her bed. But if she was asleep, who had been shaking his arm and whispering to him only moments before? His mind reeled. But as Monastrisky returned to his bed, he began to understand what was happening. The children that were inhabiting the museum were afraid of the military and memorabilia. some of which undoubtedly brought with it a psychic residue of the horrors of war. War is terrifying for adults, so imagine how traumatizing it would be for some children. Monastrisky felt terrible. Quote, my heart beat fast as I tried to steady my whisper and said that I would move the mannequins in the morning and that I was sorry I left them in the back room. End quote. He states, I also admonished the spirit children for coming to my home without permission in the middle of the night. I lay awake for an hour or so after and imagined the horrors these uniforms brought with them into the museum and how frightened the voices of the children were in my dreams. Monastrisky was true to his word and moved the mannequins first thing in the morning. He also made sure to ship them back to their home as soon as the exhibit was over. The spectral children never again acted out so terrifyingly. About a year later, Monastrisky left the museum and moved out of town, but he fondly remembered his time at the museum and the connection he made with the restless little ones who disembodied footsteps racing through exhibits he had heard so frequently after closing time. But Jamie doesn't believe these spirits are the only ones haunting the museum. He states, I think there may be other spirits in the museum beyond the children's. The basement is filled with from corner to corner with archival items, mining and logging equipment, children and old ladies' clothing from last century, archaic rifles and native items, everything you can think of from tea sets and family photo albums to reel audio tapes. You could spend hours in the basement, and I often did. If, as we believe, ghosts do attach themselves to items that meant something to them in life, then I have to believe that with the sheer number of items in the collection, other spirits must inhabit or at least visit the museum. End quote. That theory might be born out of the experience of others who suggest that at least one adult specter might have been brought to the museum when an artifact to which it was bound was added to the collection. Jeffrey, a visitor of the museum in 2012, readily admitted to having been terrified when on several different occasions he felt an invisible presence brush past him while he was pursuing the exhibits. He instinctively knew it was an adult by the height of which the unseen figure pushed past him between elbow and shoulder, and by the force it exhibited. Another visitor recalls hearing phantom footsteps in one of the exhibit halls. The sound of ethereal footfalls rose and the visible spirit drew nearer and faded as it passed by, but there was something odd about the sound, besides the fact that it was made by somebody who was out of this world. The witness reported unusual metallic clinking with each footstep. At first, he couldn't place a sound. Then, as the shock of the moment began to fade, the man took a look at the surroundings. There, on display, was a part of the exhibit on the areas logging his history, was a pair of caulked boots. These boots with small iron spikes was driven into their soles, were favored by lumbermen for traction while working in the woods, and most especially while driving logs down swollen rivers in the springtime. They were very easily could have been a clicking sound with the one that the visitor heard. When those boots were donated to the museum, did they bring with them a spiritual silver of the man who once wore them? Julie, as a woman who was an eager college student in the late 1990s, found summer employment at the museum. It was a thrill for her. She loved those opportunities to venture into the basement to explore its eclectic clutter of artifacts. One day she spent a few moments reading through a pile of yellowed magazines. These are so ancient, she remembers, thinking, it's like reading a history book. After perhaps 20 minutes of delicately flipping through old pages, Julie reluctantly put down the magazines and returned to her task. Later that night, she was restless and couldn't sleep. Growing frustrated, Julie decided to watch some television in hopes that it would make her drowsy and allow her to drift off. When she opened her eyes to reach for the remote, the young woman was stunned to find her room cast in an eerie yellow light, almost as if it was on the pages of one of the magazines she had been reading earlier that day. If that wasn't startling enough, she gasped and then saw a gentleman glide through her room and disappear into the wall. Although he looked real enough, the man was transparent, cast completely in gray shades, and was dressed in a woolen woolen suit a century out of style. Moments later, a few blinks of her eyes later, the room returned to its normal appearance. Julie was left struggling to explain the experience. Had one of the museum's residents' ghosts followed her home? Could her handling of the magazine somehow have brought her into the contact of a previous reader in the era of a long past? Had she experienced a time loop, somehow witnessing a shadowy reflection of a previous event? Julie is just not too sure. It's possible the museum's ghostly residents have become more settled in recent years. As reports of activity are becoming less frequent, the current manager is Nadine Hammond, a bright and eager young woman who brings both passion and energy to the museum. Hammond is open-minded about the presence of ghosts in the building she oversees, but admits she has never met them personally. Quote, I've heard rumors of the museum being haunted, but I've never been given anything specific. I've never had any experiences myself, end quote. A part of her wishes that she does, and another part says she doesn't hope to. Thousands of people visit the West Parry Sound District Museum every year. They enjoy the experience of stepping back in a time when the town was young, and through the exhibits learn the fascinating history of the region and its people. Only a tiny handful of those visit the museum ever experience anything unusual or paranormal. Those that do are more amused than frightened. After all, the spirits most prominently haunting the building are cheerful children who view the museum as their eternal playground. Even the adult ghosts seem restless rather than malicious. They, like the artifacts to which they are attached to, reflect Parry Sound's history. That is the museum's mandate, after all. Okay, I'm going to leave it at that. The next chapter is Beech Grove, which states that there's ghosts there in ancestral cottages. So that's going to be a pretty cool chapter to read. I'll leave a little marker here so I know where we're at. Great. Now I got one more candy to eat, and I saved the best one for last. And it's the Reese's Pieces Peanut Butter Cup. So, we'll be in touch again soon. I do hope you enjoyed today's reading. We'll get back into reading some more spooky ghost stories and whatnot relatively soon. But if you haven't already, subscribe, leave a comment, let me know what you guys are dressing up as for Halloween, or what you'll be doing for this Halloween. Let me know if you have any suggestions for some spooky themed videos. Here we go. We got the one little peanut butter cup, the small, like the size of my pupil. Here we go. And there you go. Just like that. All gone. Okay, folks. You just tuned into another GumChu video, rather. We hope you enjoyed your day, and I hope you had a wonderful Thanksgiving weekend. For those who are Canadian, grateful for you all. Have a wonderful long weekend, and for those who are in the States, happy early Thanksgiving. We'll see you in the next one. Thanks, everybody. Bye.